I'm Tobias, 28, and the day I graduated with honors from MIT should have been the proudest moment of my life. Instead, as I walked across that stage clutching my engineering degree, all I could see were two empty seats in the family section. My parents chose my sister Audrey's ballet recital over witnessing the culmination of my 4 years of sacrifice. That single decision exposed the truth I'd been avoiding for years. Before I share what happened that day, where are you watching from? Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt invisible in your own family. Growing up in suburban Boston, I always understood that excellence wasn't just expected, it was the baseline. My father, Richard, a tenured physics professor at Harvard, and my mother, Eleanor, a research scientist at a prestigious biomedical lab, created an environment where academic achievement was the primary currency of approval. By age 5, I was already solving math problems meant for third graders, and my parents beamed with pride at parent-teacher conferences. I was their prodigy, their first attempt at parenting, and the vessel for their considerable intellectual ambitions. The family dynamic shifted dramatically when my sister Audrey was born when I was 7. At first, I was excited to have a sibling, someone to teach and play with, but as the years progressed, I noticed subtle changes in how attention was distributed in our household. The shift wasn't immediate or obvious. It was more like a slow, steady erosion of my place in the family hierarchy. Audrey showed an early aptitude for movement and rhythm. By age 4, she was enrolled in her first ballet class. I still remember the look on my mother's face when Audrey first twirled in her tiny pink tutu, a look of wonder and pride I'd never seen, even when I'd mastered calculus at 12. My childhood bedroom walls were covered with science fair ribbons and academic certificates, while the living room was dominated by Audrey's dance trophies. When guests came over, they were invariably guided to the trophy display first. My achievements mentioned as an afterthought. "Oh, and Tobias is doing well in school too," became a familiar refrain. The pattern became more pronounced as we grew older. When I won the state science fair with a project on renewable energy storage solutions, my parents couldn't attend the awards ceremony because it conflicted with Audrey's dance practice, not even a performance, just practice. When I scored a perfect 1600 on my SATs, the small celebration dinner they promised was canceled because Audrey had a last-minute opportunity to audition for a summer dance program. My maternal cousin Marcus was the first person to recognize the disparity in how I was treated. 3 years older than me, Marcus would visit during holidays and summer breaks from college. During one Thanksgiving when I was 16, he found me alone in my room while the rest of the family fawned over Audrey's impromptu living room performance. "They don't see what they're doing to you, do they?" he asked, sitting beside me on the bed. I shrugged, pretending it didn't matter, but Marcus saw through it. "Your achievements are extraordinary, Tobias. Don't ever forget that, even if they sometimes do." From then on, Marcus became my ally, the one person in the family who made a point of acknowledging my accomplishments and offering the validation my parents increasingly withheld. My high school graduation was the dress rehearsal for what would later happen at MIT. I was valedictorian, set to give a speech at 10 in the morning. My parents arrived 20 minutes late, slipping into the back of the auditorium just as I was concluding my address. They had come directly from dropping Audrey off at an important rehearsal, choosing to ensure she wasn't late rather than seeing my entire speech. Despite receiving scholarship offers from Stanford, Caltech, and Princeton, I chose MIT. Part of my decision was based on the school's excellent engineering program, but I can admit now that I also chose it to stay close to home, still desperately seeking the approval I'd been chasing my entire life. I thought proximity might make it easier for them to be present, to finally see me. Throughout those formative years, I developed a complicated relationship with achievement. I craved external validation but found that no matter how high I climbed, it was never enough to shift the family spotlight. Teachers praised me. Classmates respected me. But at home, I remained in the shadows of Audrey's pirouettes and arabesques. I learned to celebrate my victories privately, to find worth in personal satisfaction rather than parental approval, a skill that would ultimately save me, though I didn't know it then. By the time I left for college, I had already begun the process of emotional detachment from my parents, though I wouldn't complete it until years later, on a spring day when 2 empty chairs would finally give me the clarity I needed. MIT was both a sanctuary and a battlefield. The campus bristled with brilliant minds, and for the first time, I wasn't automatically the smartest person in every room. The academic rigor was exactly what I needed, a challenge worthy of my abilities, and a community that valued intellectual curiosity above all else. Within my first semester, I found my tribe: Kevin, a computer science major with an infectious laugh who could code for 48 hours straight, fueled only by energy drinks; Raj, a mechanical engineering genius whose family had moved from Mumbai with similar expectations of perfection; and Melissa, a theoretical physics student who approached complex equations with the same grace Audrey brought to her ballet. These friends saw me, truly saw me, in a way my family never had. "Dude, your brain is terrifying," Kevin would joke after I helped him debug a particularly stubborn piece of code. In a good way, though. Our study group became my makeshift family, celebrating each other's victories and commiserating over challenging professors and near-impossible problem sets. When I aced my thermodynamics final as a sophomore, a test that had a 40% fail rate, it was Kevin, Raj, and Melissa who took me out for burgers and milkshakes. My parents, when I called with the news, were distracted. "That's nice, honey," my mother said, her voice distant. "Listen, can I call you back? Audrey's about to go on for her solo, and I need to record it." The call back never came. As Audrey transitioned from a promising young dancer to a serious pre-professional, my parents' investment in her career grew exponentially, both emotionally and financially. Ballet training at her level was expensive. Private coaching, summer intensives, competition fees, custom point shoes that wore out weekly. During my sophomore year, I received a call from my father that would become a pattern. "Tobias, we're going to need to reduce your allowance this semester," he said without preamble. "Audrey's been invited to a prestigious workshop in New York, and the tuition is substantial." "Dad, I'm already working 20 hours a week at the computer lab," I replied, trying to keep the frustration from my voice. "I need that money for textbooks and food." "You're resourceful," he replied, "and you can always take out additional student loans." This opportunity for Audrey could be career-defining. By junior year, our phone conversations had become shorter and increasingly focused on Audrey. Even when I initiated the calls, within 5 minutes the topic would inevitably shift. "How's your project on sustainable energy systems coming along?" my father might ask. But before I could fully explain, he'd interject, "That reminds me. Audrey's director is incorporating environmental themes into their next production. She has the lead role, of course." I took on additional student loans despite my parents' comfortable income, worked part-time jobs in the engineering lab and as a teaching assistant, and applied for every scholarship and grant I could find. My financial independence became a point of private pride, even as the rift between my parents and me widened into a chasm. During my senior year, something unexpected happened. The energy conversion system I'd been developing with my faculty advisor began to generate serious interest from industry leaders. My approach to improving efficiency and renewable energy storage had potential real-world applications that could impact climate change initiatives. The department selected my project for special recognition, which included presenting at a prestigious conference and an honors distinction at graduation. My academic advisor, Professor Harrington, a silver-haired woman with keen eyes and a reputation for being professionally ruthless but personally kind, pulled me aside after I presented my research to the department. "Tobias, this work is exceptional," she said. "The graduation ceremony this year will include special recognition for your contribution to the field. You'll be one of 3 students honored on stage. Will your family be attending? We reserve special seating for the families of honored graduates. Yes, I lied, not wanting to admit that I hadn't even asked them yet. They'll be there. That evening, I called home with what I thought was my trump card, the thing that would finally make them prioritize me, just this once. Mom, Dad, I've been selected for a special honor at graduation, I explained, trying to convey the significance without sounding like I was begging. Only 3 students from the entire engineering school were chosen. Professor Harrington says it could open doors for my career. That's wonderful, Tobias, my mother replied, and for a moment I felt a surge of hope. When is it again? May 15th, at 11 in the morning. The main ceremony, followed by the engineering school's special recognition. The pause that followed told me everything before she even spoke. Oh, honey, that's the day of Audrey's spring showcase. She has the lead role, and scouts from the American Ballet Theater will be there. It could determine her entire future. Mom, it's my college graduation, I said, my voice hollow, from MIT, with honors. I know, sweetheart, and we're so proud. But you understand how these things work. You've always been so self-sufficient. Audrey needs us there for support. You know how she gets before big performances. I made 3 more attempts in the weeks leading up to graduation, each conversation more desperate than the last. I sent emails detailing the significance of the honor, left voicemails explaining how the special recognition worked, even enlisted Marcus to advocate on my behalf. Nothing moved the needle. The night before graduation, I received a text from my father. Good luck tomorrow, son. Make us proud. Mom's taking video of Audrey's performance, but we'll call you right after to hear all about your day. That was the moment I knew with absolute certainty that they wouldn't be there. Not because they couldn't be, but because they chose not to be. As I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by the cap and gown I'd press carefully for the next day, something inside me shifted irrevocably. The morning of graduation dawned clear and bright. One of those perfect New England spring days that feels like a gift after the long, brutal winter. I woke at 6, though my alarm was set for 7, adrenaline already coursing through my system. For a fleeting moment, before full consciousness took hold, I wondered if my parents might surprise me, if they'd realized the magnitude of their decision and changed their minds overnight. My phone showed no missed calls or messages. I showered, shaved, and dressed with mechanical precision. The apartment I shared with Kevin was empty. He'd left the previous evening to pick up his parents from the airport. On the refrigerator was a note in his messy handwriting. T. Mom and Dad insist you join us for the post-ceremony lunch. No excuses. They're excited to meet the roommate I've been complaining about for 4 years. K. The gesture brought a lump to my throat. Kevin's parents had never met me, yet they made sure to include me in their celebration. The crisp white shirt, the navy blue tie, the pressed khaki pants. I dressed slowly, methodically. I remembered my mother teaching me to tie a tie before my first middle school science fair. You want to look professional when you explain your hypotheses to the judges, she'd said, her fingers deftly creating the perfect Windsor knot. The memory felt like it belonged to someone else's life. As I settled the graduation gown over my shoulders and adjusted the honor cord's gold for academic achievement, blue and silver for engineering excellence, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I looked every bit the successful MIT graduate, except for the hollow look in my eyes. I arrived at the ceremony venue 90 minutes early, as instructed for honored graduates. The campus was already buzzing with excited families taking photos, professors in their academic regalia greeting parents, siblings holding congratulatory balloons. I kept my head down, focusing on finding the check-in area rather than watching the family moments unfolding around me. Professor Harrington spotted me as I pinned on my name badge. Tobias, there you are. I want to introduce you to some colleagues from the Department of Energy who are very interested in your research, she said, guiding me toward a group of official-looking people. For 30 minutes, I discussed my work, smiling and engaging as if this were just another day, as if my heart weren't splintering inside my chest. The conversations were a welcome distraction. "Your family can sit in the reserved section up front," an administrative assistant told me, handing me a packet with 2 special tickets. "Make sure they have these, or they'll be directed to general seating." "Thank you," I replied, tucking the tickets into my pocket, where they would remain untouched. As the ceremony start time approached, I took my phone out one last time. No messages. I sent a text to my parents. "About to go in for the ceremony. Let me know when you're here." I knew it was futile, but some desperate part of me still hoped. The grand MIT auditorium filled with families and friends. From my position with the other graduates, I could see the 2 empty seats in the special honors section, reserved with my last name clearly visible on the cards. As the university president began his address, I turned my phone to silent and slipped it into my pocket. Whatever happened next, I would face it with dignity. The general commencement ceremony passed in a blur of speeches and processionals. When it came time for the engineering school's special recognition, I heard my name called with perfect clarity: Tobias Allen Wright, graduating with highest honors for his groundbreaking work in renewable energy conversion systems. I walked across that vast stage alone. There was polite applause from strangers, and I heard Kevin's distinct whoop from somewhere in the crowd. The dean shook my hand, handed me my diploma, and murmured congratulations. The photographer captured the moment: my forced smile, the handshake, the honor medal being placed around my neck. A perfect record of the most hollow achievement of my life. After the ceremony, I stood at the designated meeting area, watching reunions happen all around me. Raj's entire extended family had flown from India, 16 people wearing matching t-shirts with his face printed on them. Melissa's parents were both crying as they hugged her. Kevin found me quickly, his parents in tow. "Tobias, man of the hour," he exclaimed, clapping me on the shoulder. "My parents have been dying to meet you. Mom, Dad, this is the genius I've been telling you about." Mrs. Hannigan embraced me like I was her own son. "We are so proud of you boys," she said, her eyes damp. "Kevin tells us you're the reason he passed differential equations." "It was definitely the other way around," I replied automatically, the social script coming to my rescue when genuine emotion failed me. We chatted for a few minutes before I excused myself, claiming I needed to speak with a professor. Instead, I found a quiet corner behind the reception hall and checked my phone. There was one message, not from my parents but from Marcus. "Thinking of you today, cousin. Proud of you." Attached was a photo he'd seen on my mother's social media. My parents in formal attire, beaming as they stood beside Audrey in her ballet costume, flowers in her arms. The caption read, "Proudest day for our talented daughter. Star of the show and recognized by ABT. Scouts, blessed proud parents." The timestamp showed it had been posted during my graduation ceremony. Something broke inside me then, not with a dramatic shatter, but with the quiet finality of ice cracking on a frozen lake. I put my phone away and rejoined the celebration, going through the motions with mechanical precision. I smiled for photos with my friends, shook hands with professors, and thanked everyone for their congratulations. That evening, after declining invitations to graduation parties, I returned to my empty apartment. With methodical care, I hung up my graduation gown, placed my diploma on the desk, and set my honor cords beside it. Then I sat on the edge of my bed and finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of the day's abandonment. I didn't cry. That would come later. Instead, I experienced a strange, almost peaceful clarity. For years I had been trying to earn my place in my family's attention, believing that if I achieved enough, they would finally see me. Now I understood that no achievement would ever be enough. The problem wasn't that I hadn't done enough to matter. The problem was that they had chosen, repeatedly and deliberately, not to see my worth. As midnight approached, my phone rang. My mother's name appeared on the screen. I answered, my voice surprisingly steady. "Hi, Mom. Tobias. Congratulations. Graduate. We want to hear all about your big day. In the background, I could hear glasses clinking and my father's booming laugh. They were celebrating, just not with me. The morning after graduation dawned with strange clarity. I woke early, made coffee, and sat at my small kitchen table with a notepad. The apartment was silent. Kevin had spent the night with his family at their hotel. The isolation felt appropriate for what I needed to do. My phone rang at 9:15. Mother, right on schedule for her Sunday morning call. Good morning, sweetheart. Still riding the graduation high? Her voice was cheerful, completely devoid of any recognition of what had transpired the day before. Did you get the photos I texted you of Audrey's performance? She continued without waiting for my response. The artistic director said it was her best execution of the role yet. The ABT scouts took her information. I let her talk, listening to the familiar cadence of her excitement over Audrey's achievements. Finally, during a pause, I spoke. Mom, do you realize what yesterday was for me? Of course, honey. Your graduation. We're so proud. Your father wants to take you to dinner when you come home next weekend to celebrate. It wasn't just graduation, Mom. I received special honors. I was one of 3 students recognized from the entire engineering school. There were reserved seats for you and Dad. Her voice faltered slightly. Well, yes, and that's wonderful. But you understand why we couldn't make it. Audrey's showcase was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Everything with Audrey is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, I replied, surprised by the calmness in my voice. My MIT graduation was also a once-in-a-lifetime event. Tobias, don't be dramatic. It was just a ceremony. You still got your degree. Audrey needed us there for moral support. You know how she gets before performances. In that moment, with those dismissive words, just a ceremony, something crystallized within me. Years of accumulated hurt, disappointment, and neglect condensed into a single unassailable decision. I won't be coming home next weekend, I said quietly, or any weekend in the foreseeable future. What are you talking about? We've already planned. I'm done, Mom. I've spent my entire life trying to earn your attention, your pride, your presence. Yesterday made it perfectly clear where I stand in this family, and I'm no longer willing to accept that position. You're overreacting, she said, her voice taking on the sharp edge it did whenever she felt challenged. This is about more than just missing a ceremony. You're right. It's about 22 years of being an afterthought. 22 years of having every accomplishment overshadowed. 22 years of being told, in ways both subtle and overt, that I matter less. That's absurd. We love you and Audrey equally. Love isn't just a feeling, Mom. It's a series of choices. And yesterday, like so many days before, you and Dad made your choice very clear. The conversation deteriorated from there. My mother cycled through indignation, dismissal, and finally tearful guilt-tripping. My father got on the phone and tried his authoritative approach, then his logical professor's analysis of why I was being unreasonable. Audrey sent multiple text messages calling me selfish for trying to ruin her big moment. None of it penetrated the calm certainty I'd found. By the end of that day, I had booked a flight to San Francisco for the following week. A tech firm focusing on renewable energy solutions had made me an offer during my final semester, and I'd been considering it alongside several East Coast opportunities. The decision to move 3,000 miles away from my family suddenly made it the clear frontrunner. I packed up my apartment methodically, donating what I couldn't take with me and shipping essential items ahead. My friends were surprised by my sudden decision but supportive once I explained. You're doing the right thing, Melissa said as she helped me pack my books. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's survival. Those first weeks in California were a strange mix of liberation and grief. I threw myself into my new job, working long hours on projects that challenged and engaged me. I found an apartment in Oakland with a view of the Bay Bridge from the roof deck. I joined a rock climbing gym and started hiking on weekends. On the surface, I was building a new life with impressive efficiency, but nights were difficult. I would wake at 3 a.m., heart racing, questioning my decision. Had I overreacted? Was I the unreasonable one? The lifetime of conditioning to prioritize family above all else didn't dissolve overnight. My parents' attempts to contact me followed a predictable pattern. First came the angry messages demanding I stop this childish behavior. Then came concerned texts about my mental health, suggesting I might need therapy. Ironically, they were right about this, though not for the reasons they thought. Finally came the guilt-laden appeals. This is killing your mother. Audrey cries herself to sleep worrying about you. We're still your parents, no matter how much you try to deny it. I responded to none of them. The only family member I maintained contact with was Marcus, who respected my boundaries while keeping me minimally informed of family matters. They're telling everyone you're having some kind of breakdown, he reported during one of our monthly calls. Aunt Eleanor is spinning it as post-graduation stress or something. But I think some of the extended family sees through it. Are they even considering that they might be wrong? I asked. His pause told me everything. They're incapable of seeing it, Tobias. Their narrative about being perfect parents is too central to their identity. 6 months into my California life, I started therapy. My therapist, Dr. Rivera, specialized in family trauma and helped me understand the dynamics that had shaped me. What you're describing has elements of narcissistic family patterns, she explained during one session. The golden child and scapegoat dynamic between you and your sister is textbook, but understanding it doesn't mean you have to tolerate it. Under her guidance, I began the slow work of rebuilding my sense of self-worth, independent of achievement or external validation. I learned to recognize the critical internal voice that sounded suspiciously like my father. I practiced setting boundaries in all my relationships. I grieved for the family support I never had and would never have. Estrangement is not a decision most people make lightly, Dr. Rivera told me. It's often the last resort after years of trying everything else. Give yourself grace for making a difficult choice to protect yourself. By the 1-year mark of my self-imposed exile, I had built a life I was proud of. I'd been promoted at work, made new friends, even dated a little. I no longer flinched when seeing happy families in restaurants or parks. The grief had transformed into something more manageable, a dull ache rather than a sharp pain. And then, just as I was finding my equilibrium, an embossed envelope arrived in my mailbox with Marcus's return address. Inside was an invitation to his wedding, 6 weeks away, in Boston, where my entire extended family would be gathered. The peaceful life I'd constructed suddenly faced its first real test. Marcus's wedding invitation sat on my coffee table for 3 days before I could bring myself to respond. My first instinct was to decline with a thoughtful gift and a heartfelt note. Marcus would understand. He, more than anyone, knew why I'd chosen to distance myself from the family. But as I drafted my regrets, something stopped me. Marcus had been my only ally throughout childhood. He was the one person who saw the dynamic clearly and still loved all of us anyway. He'd kept in touch during my year of estrangement without ever pressuring me to reconcile. Skipping his wedding felt like punishing the wrong person. I called him on a Sunday afternoon. "I was hoping you'd reach out," he said when he answered. "Did you get the invitation?" "I did." "Congratulations. Jessica seems wonderful from everything you've told me." "She is. She's actually the one who insisted we send you a proper invitation instead of just a text." She said, "Family rifts shouldn't dictate our guest list." "Smart woman," I replied. "I'm guessing my parents and Audrey are attending?" "Yes," Marcus said carefully. "But the ceremony and reception are large enough that you could easily avoid direct interaction if you wanted. No assigned seating, except at the head table." After a long conversation about logistics and boundaries, I decided to attend. I would fly in the day before, attend the ceremony and reception, and leave the following morning, minimizing my time in Boston and any opportunity for extended family confrontation. Marcus promised to not mention my attendance to my parents, giving me the element of surprise and control over any potential interaction. I prepared for that weekend, like a military operation. I bought a new suit, booked a hotel on the opposite side of town from where my parents would likely stay, and rehearsed polite but firm responses to potential provocations. Dr. Rivera helped me develop grounding techniques to use if the situation became emotionally overwhelming. Remember, you're not walking in as the family scapegoat anymore, she reminded me during our last session before the trip. You're a successful engineer with a life you've built on your terms. Stand in that power. The flight to Boston was turbulent, matching my internal state. As the plane descended over the familiar coastline, I felt a surge of conflicting emotions, nostalgia for the city where I'd spent so much of my life, anxiety about the confrontation to come, and a strange, unexpected longing to see my family despite everything. The human heart is not always rational. The rehearsal dinner was for immediate family, and the wedding party only, allowing me to avoid that potential minefield. Instead, I had dinner with a former MIT classmate and went to bed early, setting 3 alarms to ensure I wouldn't oversleep. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 in the afternoon at an historic church in Cambridge, followed by a reception at a waterfront hotel. I arrived 20 minutes early, slipping into a pew near the back on the bride's side, technically incorrect etiquette, but strategic for avoiding immediate detection by my family. My plan fell apart almost immediately. As I sat reviewing the program, a familiar voice broke through my concentration. "Tobias, is that you?" I looked up to see my mother's sister, Aunt Patricia, standing in the aisle with undisguised shock on her face. Before I could respond, she was hugging me tightly, her perfume the same she'd worn my entire life, triggering a cascade of childhood memories. "We had no idea you were coming. Your parents will be so—" "It was a last-minute decision," I interrupted, gently disengaging from her embrace. "How have you been, Aunt Patricia?" That brief exchange was just the beginning. Within minutes, word of my presence spread through the extended family. I caught glimpses of my parents in the front rows, their heads turning as the whispers reached them. Audrey, seated beside them in a pale blue dress, looked back directly at me, her expression unreadable from that distance. The ceremony itself provided temporary sanctuary, all attention properly focused on Marcus and Jessica as they exchanged vows. I found myself genuinely moved by their obvious devotion to each other and momentarily forgot the family drama unfolding around me. That peace evaporated the moment the recessional music began. As guests began to exit their rows, I knew confrontation was inevitable. I stayed in my pew, allowing others to file out ahead of me, delaying the moment as long as possible. The strategy failed. As the church emptied, my parents deliberately worked their way against the flow of departing guests until they reached my row. My father looked older than I remembered, with more gray at his temples. My mother had lost weight. These observations registered distantly, like data points in an experiment I was observing rather than participating in. "Tobias," my father said, his voice carrying the professorial authority I'd grown up with. "We had no idea you would be here. Marcus invited me," I replied simply. "He's always been good about keeping in touch." The implied criticism landed exactly as intended. My mother flinched slightly. "Well, this is wonderful," she said, her social mask slipping seamlessly into place. "The whole family together again. We should take photos at the reception." "I'm here for Marcus and Jessica," I clarified. "This doesn't change anything between us." Before they could respond, the wedding coordinator approached, politely but firmly directing everyone to the exits so the photography session with the wedding party could begin. The confrontation was postponed, not avoided. The reception was held in a ballroom with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor. Under different circumstances, I would have appreciated the elegant setting and thoughtful details. Instead, I focused on navigating the crowded room without prolonged encounters with my immediate family. For the first hour, I was largely successful. I chatted with distant relatives who knew little about the estrangement, caught up with Marcus's friends I'd known from childhood summers, and kept to the periphery of the room. My parents seemed to be respecting my space, though I caught them watching me from across the room multiple times. It was Audrey who broke the standoff. As I stood by the windows during a lull between dinner and dancing, she appeared at my elbow, champagne flute in hand. 1 year of silence, and you just show up like nothing happened? Her voice was low but intense. At 21, she had grown into a poised young woman with our mother's delicate features and our father's intense gaze. "I'm here for Marcus," I repeated, the phrase becoming my mantra for the evening. "Do you have any idea what you've put them through?" She continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "Mom lost 15 pounds from stress. Dad started having trouble sleeping. All because you decided your feelings were hurt over one missed event." I took a slow breath before responding, remembering Dr. Rivera's advice to speak from my current perspective, not from old wounds. It wasn't one event, Audrey. It was a pattern established over our entire lives. The graduation was just the final confirmation of where I stood in the family hierarchy. She scoffed. "So dramatic. We've always supported you. Your experience in our family was different from mine. That's not surprising you were the priority." "That's not fair," she snapped, her voice rising slightly. "It's not my fault I needed more attention for my career." "I never said it was your fault," I replied calmly. "This isn't about blaming you. The issue is with our parents' choices." Our conversation was interrupted as the DJ announced the first dance. For a while, the formal wedding schedule provided structure that prevented further confrontation. Marcus and Jessica danced. Toasts were made. Cake was cut. I began to think I might escape the evening without further incident. I was wrong. As the formal proceedings gave way to open dancing and mingling, my mother cornered me near the dessert table. Her eyes showed she'd had several glasses of champagne, loosening the rigid self-control she typically maintained. "Enough of this ridiculous silent treatment," she said, loud enough that nearby guests turned to look. "You're making a scene by avoiding us at a family event." "I'm not making a scene, Mother," I replied quietly. "I'm attending my cousin's wedding and trying to do so without drama." "Without drama?" Her voice rose further. "You disappear for a year, cut off all contact, break your father's heart, and then show up unannounced and you're claiming to avoid drama?" People were definitely staring now. My father appeared at her side, attempting to diffuse the situation. "Eleanor, this isn't the place," he murmured, placing a hand on her arm that she immediately shook off. "No, Richard. I'm tired of tiptoeing around his feelings. We have done nothing but support and love this boy his entire life. And this is how he repays us? By humiliating us in front of the entire family?" The irony of her claiming I was creating a scene while she was the one raising her voice seemed to escape her. Guests were actively moving away from our corner of the room, giving us a bubble of awkward space. I maintained my calm, though my heart was racing. "If you want to have this conversation, we can find somewhere private." "Oh, now you want to talk? After ignoring our calls and messages for a year?" She was nearly shouting now. My father tried again. "Eleanor, please. Not here." "No, Richard. I want him to explain himself. I want him to tell everyone here how we failed him so terribly that he had to cut us out of his life without so much as a conversation." That was the breaking point, the moment when all my careful preparation couldn't contain the years of accumulated hurt and rage. "You want me to explain?" "Fine," I said, my voice deadly quiet. "You and Dad spent my entire life making it clear that Audrey was the priority. Every recital, every rehearsal, every audition was more important than any achievement of mine. When I graduated with honors from MIT, one of the most prestigious universities in the world, you chose to attend a ballet recital instead. Not a once-in-a-lifetime performance, not a career-defining moment, but one of dozens of recitals that happen every year. You made your choice, and I finally made mine. Audrey had appeared beside our mother, her face flushed with anger. It wasn't just a recital. There were scouts there from ABT. There are always scouts, Audrey. There's always a reason why your activities take precedence. And that would be fine if they had ever even once chosen to prioritize something important to me. My mother was crying now, mascara trailing down her cheeks. How can you say such horrible things? After everything we sacrificed for your education? Before I could respond, Marcus materialized beside me, his face tight with concern. Aunt Eleanor, Uncle Richard, this isn't the time or place. If you can't keep this conversation private and civil, I'll have to ask you to take a break from the reception. The audacity of his request, asking the parents of the groom to leave, momentarily stunned everyone into silence. In that pause, I took the opportunity to step away, walking quickly toward the exit. I needed air, space, distance from the toxic emotional soup I'd just been submerged in. On the hotel's outdoor terrace, overlooking the harbor lights, I gulped in the cool evening air. My hands were shaking. Despite the confrontation going badly, I felt strangely vindicated. For the first time, I had stated my truth plainly, without cushioning it to protect their feelings. Whether they heard me or not was beyond my control. After about 15 minutes, the terrace door opened. I tensed, expecting my parents, but it was Marcus who joined me at the railing. Well, that was quite a scene, he said, loosening his bow tie. You okay? Honestly, better than I expected to be. Sorry if I ruined your reception. He waved away my apology. Jessica's grandmother got drunk and started telling inappropriate stories about her late husband right after you left. You're officially off the hook for most dramatic moment of the evening. We both laughed, the tension breaking slightly. I'm going to head back to my hotel, I said. I think I've made enough of an impression for one night. Marcus nodded, understanding as always. For what it's worth, I think you held yourself with dignity in there. And I think some of the family saw the dynamic clearly for the first time. I hugged him goodbye, promising to catch up soon, under better circumstances, and slipped away from the reception without further confrontation. Back in my hotel room, the adrenaline crash hit hard. I sat on the edge of the bed, shaking and finally allowing the tears that had been building all evening to fall. It wasn't the vindication I'd expected. It wasn't the closure I'd hoped for. It was messy and painful and raw, but it was real. For the first time in my life, I had stood in my truth without flinching, without minimizing, without accepting the family narrative. Whatever happened next, that was a victory no one could take from me. The morning after Marcus's wedding, I woke to a soft knocking at my hotel room door. Disoriented and expecting housekeeping, I called out that I didn't need service. The knocking persisted. When I finally opened the door, still in my rumpled t-shirt and sweatpants, I found my aunt and Uncle Marcus's parents standing in the hallway. Uncle David held a cardboard tray with coffee cups, and Aunt Sophia carried a bag that smelled promisingly of pastries. We brought breakfast, Uncle David said simply. May we come in? Too surprised to refuse, I stepped aside to let them enter. As Marcus's parents, they'd always been warm but somewhat peripheral figures in my life. We'd never had a significant one-on-one conversation, and I couldn't imagine what had prompted this early morning visit. Aunt Sophia unpacked croissants and fruit onto the small hotel desk, while Uncle David distributed coffees. The domestic normality of their actions was disarming. We wanted to check on you before you left town, Aunt Sophia began, perching on the edge of the desk chair. Last night was intense. That's one word for it, I agreed cautiously. I'm sorry if it caused problems for Marcus and Jessica's reception. Uncle David shook his head firmly. That's not why we're here, Tobias. We're here because what you said last night resonated with us, and we wanted you to know you're not alone in your observations. I nearly choked on my coffee. What? Aunt Sophia's expression softened. We've watched the dynamic in your family for years. David and I have discussed it privately many times, how Eleanor and Richard seem to have different standards for you and Audrey, different levels of enthusiasm for your achievements. We thought about saying something several times, Uncle David added, but you know how family interference usually goes. We worried we'd make things worse. This revelation that others had seen what I experienced, that it wasn't just my perception, hit me with unexpected force. For years I'd questioned my own reality, wondering if I was exaggerating the disparity in how my parents treated Audrey and me. "Why are you telling me this now?" I managed to ask. Aunt Sophia exchanged a glance with her husband before answering. "Because life is too short for unnecessary estrangement when understanding might help. And because there's context you might not have that could help you make sense of your parents' behavior." For the next hour, over cooling coffee and flaky pastries, they shared perspectives I'd never considered. How my mother had grown up overshadowed by her own more talented sister, Aunt Sophia herself, and how that might have unconsciously influenced her parenting. How my father's academic family had valued his intellectual achievements but never quite gave him the emotional validation he craved. Perhaps explaining why he pushed me academically but withheld the deeper approval I sought. "This doesn't excuse their behavior," Uncle David emphasized. "Explaining isn't the same as justifying. But sometimes understanding the root helps with healing." As they prepared to leave, Aunt Sophia handed me a small notebook. "Several family members approached us after you left last night, sharing similar observations about the family dynamic. With their permission, I wrote down their contact information. They'd like to reconnect with you, independent of your relationship with your parents." The notebook contained a dozen names and email addresses, cousins, second cousins, even my father's brother, whom I'd always assumed took my parents' side in everything. Each entry included a brief note. "Always thought you were incredible. Would love to catch up. Saw what you went through, you deserved better. Your robotics project in 10th grade inspired my son to study engineering." These small validations, these extended hands from family members I'd assumed were either oblivious or complicit, cracked something open inside me. I wasn't crazy. I hadn't imagined it. And I wasn't alone. Over the next few weeks, I began cautiously reconnecting with these extended family members. Each conversation revealed new perspectives on my family dynamic and my own worth that I'd never considered. My father's brother, Uncle James, took me to lunch during a business trip to San Francisco. "Your father and I grew up with a deeply conditional kind of love," he explained over sandwiches. "Achievement was the only currency that mattered in our household. I've spent years in therapy trying not to replicate that with my own kids. Richard never did that work, he just passed it on." A second cousin who'd attended many family gatherings during our childhood wrote me a long email. "I remember watching you present that incredible science project when you were maybe 12, and your parents were so distracted by Audrey practicing her dance moves in the corner that they missed your whole explanation. Even as a teenager myself, I remember thinking it was wrong." The most surprising contact came from Audrey's boyfriend, Tyler. He reached out through Marcus, asking if we could meet privately when I was next in Boston. Curious and somewhat wary, I agreed to a coffee when I returned for a conference 2 months after the wedding. Tyler was tall and serious, a music composition student at Berkeley who had been dating my sister for nearly 2 years. He fidgeted nervously with his cup for several minutes before getting to the point. "Audrey doesn't know I'm meeting you," he began. "She'd probably be furious if she found out. But after the wedding, and seeing how everything went down, I thought you should know she sees it too. The favoritism. She's always seen it. This revelation stunned me, but she's always defended them. At the wedding, she was angry at me for hurting them." Tyler sighed. "It's complicated. She benefits from being the favorite, obviously. But it comes with enormous pressure. Any mistake feels catastrophic because her whole identity is wrapped up in being the perfect daughter, the brilliant dancer. And deep down, she knows it's not fair to you." Has she said that explicitly? Not in those exact words. But after your confrontation at the wedding, she cried all night. Not because she was angry, but because she said she finally understood why you left. She said, "If they had treated me like they treated Tobias, I would have left too." I sat back, absorbing this. Why are you telling me this? Because I love Audrey, and I see how this family dynamic hurts her too, just in different ways than it hurt you. The perfectionism, the anxiety, the fear of disappointing them, it's destroying her. She nearly had a breakdown last semester when she injured her ankle and couldn't perform for 6 weeks. Their approval is so conditional on her success that any setback feels like total failure. We talked for nearly 3 hours, Tyler sharing insights into my sister's experience that I'd never considered. How she felt trapped by our parents' expectations. How their excessive focus on her created isolation from peers. How she both craved and resented their attention. "Your sister admires you more than you know," Tyler said as we parted. "The fact that you built a life on your own terms, that you had the courage to walk away, she talks about it when she's being honest with herself." 2 days later, I received a text from an unknown number. "It's Audrey. Can we talk? Just us." We met at a small cafe near her dance studio. The conversation started awkwardly, both of us guarded and uncertain. But as the afternoon progressed, walls began to crumble. For the first time in our lives, we spoke honestly about our shared family experience from our different perspectives. "I always thought you hated me," she admitted, stirring her tea endlessly, "for taking all the attention." "I never hated you," I assured her. "I hated the situation. There was enough love to go around, they just chose not to distribute it equally." "I'm starting to see that now," she said quietly. "The way they put all their focus on me, it wasn't healthy for either of us. And now I don't know who I am outside of being their star performer." We talked about the possibility of her starting therapy, about setting her own boundaries with our parents, about discovering who she was beyond the identity they'd created for her. By the time we parted, something fragile but real had formed between us, not yet friendship, but a path toward genuine siblinghood that had never before seemed possible. "I can't promise to fix things with Mom and Dad," I told her as we hugged goodbye, "but I'm willing to work on our relationship, separate from them." "I'd like that," she replied, and for the first time in memory, her smile seemed genuinely directed at me, not performed for an audience. These new connections and perspectives didn't erase the pain of my childhood or the trauma of that missed graduation, but they expanded my understanding of the complex dynamics that had shaped my family. The black and white narrative I'd constructed began to develop shades of gray, not excusing my parents' behavior, but contextualizing it within generational patterns and their own unhealed wounds. Most importantly, these conversations reinforced the rightness of my boundaries. Understanding the origins of harmful behavior didn't mean I had to subject myself to more of it. Compassion didn't require proximity. I could hold space for the complexity of my parents as flawed humans, while still protecting myself from their damaging patterns. As I flew back to California after that visit, I felt lighter than I had in years. The knot of anger that had lived in my chest began to loosen, not because I'd forgiven my parents, but because I no longer needed their validation to know my worth. The family I was building around me, friends, colleagues, extended relatives who saw me clearly, was becoming more than enough. 2 years after the wedding confrontation, my life had transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined when I first made the decision to cut ties with my parents. My work in renewable energy storage systems had advanced rapidly, earning me a leadership position at the firm and recognition in the industry. I'd moved to a larger apartment with a view of the Golden Gate Bridge, adopted a rescue dog named Einstein, and built a social circle of genuine, supportive relationships. The most significant change wasn't external, but internal. The constant need for validation that had driven me through childhood and young adulthood had diminished. I no longer measured my worth by achievements or others' approval. Therapy had helped me recognize and dismantle the conditioned responses that had shaped so much of my behavior, replacing them with healthier patterns. My relationship with Audrey had evolved into something unexpected, a genuine friendship. We spoke weekly, sharing our lives and supporting each other's growth. She had started therapy herself and begun making bold choices for her life, including taking a break from ballet to explore other artistic interests. The distance from our parents' expectations had allowed her to discover parts of herself that had been buried under the weight of being the golden child. "I'm taking a ceramics class," she told me during one of our video calls, holding up a lopsided but charming mug. "I'm terrible at it, and it's the most liberating feeling in the world, to do something I'm not immediately good at." My parents remained a complicated absence in my life. I had maintained my boundaries firmly but not cruelly. Birthdays and holidays were acknowledged with brief, polite messages. Direct communication was limited. I'd made peace with the possibility that our relationship might never be fully repaired. Then, 18 months after the wedding, a letter arrived, not an email or text, but an actual handwritten letter in my mother's elegant script. I let it sit unopened on my coffee table for 3 days before finding the courage to read it. "Dear Tobias," it began. "This is the hardest letter I've ever had to write, because it requires me to confront truths about myself as a mother that are painful to acknowledge. After much reflection and many conversations with a family therapist, I am beginning to understand the harm that our parenting choices caused you." The letter continued for 7 pages, detailing specific instances where they had failed me, acknowledging the pattern of favoritism, and expressing genuine remorse not just for missing my graduation, but for the lifetime of small betrayals that preceded it. There was no defensiveness, no justification, just honest acknowledgement of the pain they had caused. "We don't expect forgiveness," my father had written in a separate section. "We don't even expect a response. But we wanted you to know that your words at Marcus's wedding, painful as they were to hear, forced us to examine ourselves in ways we had avoided for decades. Whether or not you choose to have us in your life moving forward, we are committed to doing the work to become better people, better parents." I shared the letter with Dr. Rivera in our next session, still unsure how to respond or whether to respond at all. "This appears to be a genuine amend," she observed after reading it carefully. "Not a manipulation or attempt to rug sweep. The question isn't whether they deserve a response, but what would serve your healing." After much consideration, I agreed to a meeting neutral territory, with a family therapist present to facilitate. We chose a practice in Sacramento, halfway between San Francisco and Boston, where my parents would fly in for a day-long session. That meeting was one of the most emotionally exhausting experiences of my life. There were tears from all of us. There were moments of breakthrough and moments of regression into old patterns. The therapist skillfully guided us through decades of accumulated hurt, helping translate experiences when communication broke down. "I hear you saying that you felt your achievements were taken for granted," she would say to me, while Audrey's were celebrated. "Can you help your parents understand what impact that had on you?" Or to my parents, "I hear you expressing that you never intended to create favoritism. Can you set aside that intention for a moment and just listen to the impact your actions had on your son?" By the end of that grueling day, we had reached no dramatic resolution, no tearful family embrace that magically erased the past. What we had achieved was something more valuable, a foundation of honest communication upon which something new might be built. "We can't go back and be the parents you deserved," my father said as we parted. "But if you're willing, we'd like the chance to know the man you've become, on your terms." Those terms were explicit and non-negotiable. No more comparisons between Audrey and me. No dismissing my feelings or experiences. Regular family therapy sessions when we visited each other. And most importantly, the understanding that rebuilding trust would be a slow process with no guaranteed outcome. Over the following year, we established a cautious new relationship, monthly video calls, occasional visits with clear boundaries and expectations. When they came to San Francisco for the first time, they stayed in a hotel rather than my apartment, giving all of us the space we needed to retreat if things became overwhelming. They weren't perfect. Old habits occasionally resurfaced: my mother's tendency to center conversations on Audrey, my father's reflexive intellectualizing of emotional topics. But unlike before, they now caught themselves, apologized sincerely, and made visible efforts to do better. The most profound changes in my life weren't dependent on their evolution, however. I had built a chosen family around me: friends who showed up consistently, colleagues who valued my contributions, extended family members who offered genuine connection. I had discovered passions beyond work: photography, mountain biking, volunteer teaching at a STEM program for underserved youth. And I had met Sophia, a marine biologist with a quick laugh and zero tolerance for pretense, who loved me not for my achievements, but for who I was when all the accolades and titles were stripped away. Our relationship developed slowly and deliberately, each of us bringing our own histories and healing journeys to the table. She became another anchor in my self-created life, but never the sole source of my worth or happiness. Perhaps the most meaningful relationship that emerged from this period was with my cousin Marcus. His wedding had been the catalyst for confrontation, but his steady presence throughout my life had been a constant reminder that I was seen and valued. He and Jessica welcomed their first child during this time of family reconstruction, naming me as godfather, a gesture of trust and inclusion that meant more than any professional accolade I'd ever received. Looking back on the path from that empty graduation seat to the full life I'd built, I realized that the day my parents missed my MIT graduation truly was the day I graduated from seeking their approval. It was the painful but necessary severance that allowed me to define myself on my own terms. The freedom I found wasn't in cutting them out permanently, though that would have been a valid choice as well, but in establishing that my relationship with them was now chosen rather than obligatory, conditional on mutual respect rather than genetic obligation. The power dynamic had fundamentally shifted, and with it, the possibilities for authentic connection. I still don't know if we'll ever have the close relationship that some families enjoy. Some wounds leave permanent scars, and some trust, once broken, can never be fully restored. But I've made peace with that uncertainty. The greatest achievement of my life wasn't earning that MIT degree, or developing revolutionary energy storage systems, or even rebuilding a relationship with my parents. It was learning that my worth was never determined by their ability to see it. Sometimes the family we create matters more than the one we're born into. Sometimes the most important boundaries we set are the ones that teach others how to treat us with dignity. And sometimes the most valuable graduation isn't from an institution of higher learning, but from the limiting beliefs that keep us trapped in cycles of seeking validation where it will never be fully given. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who couldn't see your worth? Share your story in the comments below. Each journey towards self-worth is unique, but knowing we're not alone in these struggles can be incredibly healing. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life experiences and lessons learned the hard way. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, your value has never been determined by anyone's ability to recognize it.